Thank you, Phil. In just a moment, the ITV Evening News with Mary Nightingale.
Stacey Poole has a late update just after 10:30. For now, though, from the team here, thank you so much for watching. See you tomorrow. Good night. Bye-bye.
Good night.
Anger as the PM breaks his election pledge to level up rail links to the north of England. The promised high-speed line between the Midlands and Leeds has been scrapped and other plans downgraded to the fury of many.
So to have the rug pulled from under us in such an abrupt way feels brutal.
Also tonight, questions over the care of a mentally ill man left unmonitored and free to kill as he's jailed for life for murder. Crisis in England's maternity care as staff shortages begin to bite. And
it's beautiful and it's sad and it's wild and it's a ride.
Lady Gaga on Gucci, the highs and the lows of her latest role.
This is the ITV Evening News with Mary Nightingale.
Good evening. The Prime Minister's decision to scrap a new high-speed rail line between the Midlands and Leeds was branded the Great Train Robbery today. Boris Johnson confirmed that the eastern leg of the HS2 project is being axed, along with the high-speed Manchester to Leeds line. He said upgrades to existing lines would deliver improvements earlier than planned and would also protect the countryside. But Labour called it a betrayal of trust. Our North of England reporter Hannah Miller heard from some of those who say it is a lost opportunity.
In Bradford, they've been waiting 7 years for the new train line they had hoped for. About time they got an upgrade, according to passengers this morning.
I have to set off at 5 o'clock to definitely be at work by 7:30. Yes, there's other trains I can catch, but because of the system, delays and stuff, I can't risk it.
I do think they need to improve them to encourage more people to not drive to work.
The government says it's going to improve trains in the north of England. Do you believe them?
Well, I heard that maybe 5 years ago, so I haven't seen any change.
And today, the government confirmed speculation that its controversial HS2 project will stop in the East Midlands and not run up to Leeds as planned. With promises to build a new Northern Powerhouse rail line connecting Leeds, Bradford and Manchester scrapped in favour of just 40 miles of new track as the government cuts costs by £90 billion. As recently as 6 weeks ago, the Prime Minister promised,
"We will do Northern Powerhouse Rail."
Days after taking office, he said,
"I want to be the Prime Minister who does with Northern Powerhouse Rail what we did for Crossrail in London."
But today he put a spanner in the works.
Those extra high-speed lines take decades and they don't deliver the commuter benefits that I'm talking about.
At this architect in Bradford, they say the government's change of plan is holding business back.
Disappointed doesn't even begin to describe it. It's because of the euphoric high of what the opportunity represented. So to have the rug pulled from under us in such an abrupt way feels brutal.
Do you struggle to get people to work here because of how difficult it is to get here?
Yes, very simply, yes.
Labour denounced today's decision as a betrayal of the government's levelling up pledge.
The government say that Leeds to Manchester will become quicker. Why is that not good enough?
Well, certainly we're going to have 5 years plus of disruption on the Transpennine route. We don't have anywhere else to go because there's no second line. It is just not good enough to say that the times will be quicker, because it's not just about times, it's about connectivity.
And many here feel they're being left behind after years of repeated promises. The opportunities presented by a new high-speed line now perhaps less likely to arrive. Well, here in Leeds, they had been preparing for both of those new high-speed lines. Both are now cancelled, but there is an important distinction between the two. HS2 has always been controversial, particularly with some of Boris Johnson's newest Conservative MPs who feel it offers their constituents a lot of disruption and relatively little benefit. Even they, though, have always argued that Northern Powerhouse Rail should be a priority. And today's decision to downgrade that is providing much more of a backlash both among people here and on Boris Johnson's backbenches.
OK, Hannah Miller in Leeds, thank you. Well, the Prime Minister isn't just under pressure over the railways, he's still facing questions over his handling of the sleaze scandal. And when asked by our Deputy Political Editor, Newscaster, today about the Owen Paterson affair, he still refused to apologise. Well, Anushka joins us from Crewe tonight. Mr Johnson's not going to say sorry, is he?
No, I've just got off a train with the Prime Minister where I asked him about that word. Look, I first talked to him about trains and asked him about whether he was breaking promises by reducing the money, as you've just been hearing from Hannah. And on that, he said, look, you shouldn't judge everything by the amount of money, although then quickly said it was a stupendous amount of money. But on the Owen Paterson affair, which I also pushed him on, we know that he said it was a mistake. We know that he has reportedly told colleagues that he crashed the car. But as you say, there was one word that he just wouldn't say.
I think probably what people want to see is that the Parliament is working on a cross-party way.
They do, but they also want to see an apology because
I think what people want to see.
Do you think it's a negative thing? I think it humanises somebody.
I think
to be willing to say sorry.
You've heard what I've had to say about it,
Have you said sorry to any of your colleagues?
I've said what I've had to say, and you've had all sorts of good accounts about that.
So definitely not going to say sorry. As you heard, he said what he's going to say. But I promise you that he regrets what happened with this because it has had huge consequences for his party. All this scrutiny on MPs' outside earnings, but also the polls have shifted. As we know, in a few polls recently, Labour have actually taken a lead. And of course, that really matters to the Prime Minister. It matters to him as he's heading around the country into some of these key seats today, including seats like where I am right now, Crewe and Nantwich, another seat that Labour will really want to take off them. So regrets, but no sorry.
All right, Anushka Astana in Crewe, thank you. Moving on now, the mother of a man stabbed to death by a paranoid schizophrenic says those responsible for monitoring the killer have many questions to answer. Jacob Billington was killed and 7 others hurt during a series of attacks by Zephaniah McLeod. As McLeod was sentenced today to 21 years, a court heard he'd stopped taking medication and had little contact with health services. From Birmingham, here's Sangeeta Lal.
This is Zephaniah McLeod picking his victims at random in what the judge described as a murderous rampage. In September last year, he went on a stabbing spree, lunging towards people with his knife, aiming for their necks. Between his attacks, he's seen calmly walking the streets, a paranoid schizophrenic who at the time hadn't taken medication properly and had been unsupervised for 5 months. He injured 7 people and killed 23-year-old Jacob Billington. Today, Jacob's mother, Jo, condemned the mental health services in charge of McLeod's care.
Those who are responsible for the monitoring of McLeod have many questions to answer, and I will be fighting to ensure these questions are answered fully, honestly and in public.
During the attack, McLeod was even able to get a taxi ride home, rearm himself and continue his rampage.
Walk downstairs. Stand still, turn round.
The following night, officers arrested McLeod, a killer who changed the lives of his victims forever. Jacob's close friend Michael, who was also stabbed, is now living with lifelong effects from the attack. Today he had one message to share.
Jacob Billington was the best of us, and Zephaniah McLeod is a liar and a murderer.
He's been sentenced to life in prison, which he'll first serve at hospital. Today, the judge said McLeod had got lost in the mental health system, something Jacob Billington's father accepts, but still can't understand why McLeod took his son's life.
He is not a victim. My son, murdered by McLeod, is the victim.
As Michael and the rest of Jacob's friends comfort each other, they know there will always be someone missing. And they might always have questions that'll never be answered. Sangeeta Lal, ITV News, Birmingham.
Now, the former Yorkshire cricketer Ajaz Rafiq, who this week exposed a racist and bullying culture in the sport, today apologised after anti-Semitic messages emerged sent by him a decade ago. Rafiq said he was ashamed of the messages that he'd written when he was 19 and that he had no excuses. He also said he was sorry to the Jewish community. And moving on now, babies' lives are being put at risk because of a chronic shortage of midwives. That is the warning from a whistleblower who's told ITV News the profession is at crisis point. The Royal College of Midwives estimates the UK is short of 2,500 midwives. 57% of those say they would consider leaving the NHS in the next year. And currently more than 40% of the maternity services in England are rated as inadequate or requiring improvement. Rebecca Barry heard from a midwife who says she and her colleagues are at breaking point.
It's stressful, it's exhausting. It's no exaggeration to say that midwives are on their knees at the moment.
Preparing for a night shift, knowing they'll be short-staffed. This midwife has chosen to speak out about the pressures on maternity services.
I cry a lot, so do my colleagues. It's tears of frustration and pure exhaustion.
She went into the profession to support women. Now she feels she's failing them, with lives put at risk.
She could have come in with bleeding, she could have come in with concerns over her baby's movements, and it could be an hour or more before we get to her. And by the time you come to listen to the baby's heartbeat, your heart is just in your mouth, and the relief when you hear that heartbeat is just, it's overwhelming, and it comes along with that sense of what if I hadn't got there in time, or what if that heartbeat wasn't there but it was there when she arrived an hour ago.
The majority of NHS births are safe, but the pandemic has exacerbated pressures. Baby Colby spent his first days in intensive care with sepsis. Stretched staff failed to follow guidelines.
I felt neglected. It just felt like they were being torn from pillar to post and they couldn't keep up.
Months on, Colby takes medication for breathing problems.
Did you fear that you would lose your son?
Oh, definitely. The whole of my labour, I was intensely watching this monitor and terrified, watching his heart rate go up. I know there's lots of fantastic midwives and lots of fantastic staff working for the NHS that are doing their best, but the system is fundamentally broken.
Peterborough City Hospital have apologised for the poor standard of care Amy received, telling ITV News they are not alone in experiencing staffing shortages and are recruiting more midwives.
1 step, 2 step.
With widespread calls for better funding, the government insists it is spending tens of millions to boost numbers. Rebecca Barry, ITV News.
And for more on the issues of maternity care and indeed for details of how to tell us about your experiences, head to itv.com/news. Still to come on the ITV Evening News, the Prince and the Pyramids. Charles and Camilla visit Egypt and...
I saw the item where you just showed the death certificate and I thought, I recognise that.
Our report on the UK's first AIDS victim helped to reunite a family. Those stories and more after the break. Join me then. Welcome back. Last week, you may remember, we told you the remarkable story of John Eadie, who we identified as the first person in Britain to die of AIDS. It brought some comfort to John's friends who had nursed him in his final days. And tonight we can also reveal it's brought closure to members of John's family who had no idea what had happened to him. And as our UK editor Paul Brand reports, it's helped John's niece, finally, to fulfil a promise.
When we began our search for the first man to die of AIDS in Britain, we had no idea we weren't the only ones looking for him. Hi,
Hello.
Karen.
Hi. Yes.
It's so amazing to meet you. John Eady was Karen's uncle.
I've actually got some family photos you might like to have.
She spent 40 years searching for answers she finally found on TV.
I saw the item where you just showed the death certificate and I thought, I recognise that. So I rushed to the cupboard, pulled out the death certificate and I was going, oh my God, it's the same person. That's my uncle.
Because he was adopted as a boy, John's family tree is almost impossible to trace. But Karen's father had a dying wish to find him.
I have actually fulfilled my promise to my dad and that means such a lot to me.
So Karen, I have actually got 2 other photographs for you that you can finally add to your collection.
Oh wow,
Here is
thank you.
John Eady.
Good grief. Do you know, he looks so much like my dad in that one. Thank you ever so much.
John had remained a medical mystery, briefly mentioned in a science journal, until last week our documentary on ITV revealed he was the first to die of AIDS in Britain.
It was just really friendly and really warm.
Paul and Pam also contacted us after seeing his story. They knew John. He was their adoptive uncle.
We were aware of what happened, but being in the 80s, it wasn't, well, late 70s, early 80s, it wasn't talked about and sort of hits home when you've seen how he was alone.
That's the saddest part, in being alone.
But there is comfort in sharing his story. This is the first time all 3 relatives have met. We've brought them together to see where John's buried in Harrogate.
We can put some flowers down, can't we? Now it feels like he's real, you know, and it's nice to put closure to something.
Finally, we know the significance of his name. John Eady won't just go down in family, but national history. Paul Brand, ITV News.
In other news, concern is growing tonight for the safety of Chinese tennis player Peng Shuai. She hasn't been seen since making sexual assault allegations against a senior Chinese politician. An email made public yesterday claiming to be from Peng withdrew those allegations, but the WTA, which runs women's tennis, said it had a hard time believing that she'd written it and called for further proof that she is indeed safe. Here, Natural Resources Wales has banned trail hunting on all land that it owns. It is the first big landowner to impose a ban. Campaigners say the practice is used as a cover for illegal fox hunting. Now, Prince Charles visited the ancient pyramids of Giza today and spoke about modern concerns over climate change. The Prince used the first day of his tour to Egypt to press for further action. He met the country's president ahead of the next COP summit, which will be held in Egypt. From Giza, here's our royal editor, Chris Shipp.
There are many wonders in this world, but few can match the magnificence of the Great Pyramids of Giza. Any tour to Egypt, royal or otherwise, must take in this ancient site. So too did Prince Charles and Camilla after they landed in Cairo today. But for the Prince, this isn't just a moment to marvel. The global climate change fight moves from COP26 in Glasgow last week to COP27 in Egypt next year. And there are lessons, he thinks, to be learned here. They are quite magnificent structures and hard to believe they were built 2,500 years before Christ. And if ancient Egyptians can do all this, Prince Charles said tonight, surely humans of today can do something about climate change. The Prince is well aware the COP27 baton has been passed to Egypt's President Sisi, a man already criticised for his human rights record, and the Prince hopes it will be a moment for the President to step up.
The United Kingdom will be with Egypt as your friend and partner in this epic struggle to protect and restore our environment and to build a better future for us all.
One ancient civilization worked out how to construct pyramids from 2.3 million stone blocks. Our civilization now depends on all of us thinking in a similarly big way. Chris Shipp, ITV News at the Great Pyramids.
And to another natural wonder now. And if you're not a fan of crabs, you may want to look away now. Millions of red crabs have started their annual migration to the Indian Ocean from the jungles of Christmas Islands. Locals have even built mini bridges and barriers to help them on their way. Amazing sight, isn't it? And finally tonight, you might think playing the wife of a fashion icon would be second nature, perhaps, to the flamboyant singer and actor Lady Gaga. But not maybe when that woman is Patrizia Reggiani, who murdered her former husband. She told our arts editor, Nina Nana, about the challenges of playing a killer.
It was a name that sounded so sweet, so seductive.
The real-life story had everything: love, wealth, revenge and murder. And getting the coveted lead role of Patrizia Reggiani, the woman convicted of having her husband, the Gucci heir, killed, meant for Lady Gaga total absorption in the character, which she admitted affected her mentally.
I don't consider myself to be a particularly ethical person, but I am fair.
She spoke in an Italian accent for 6 months before, and then for the entire 3.5 months of filming.
That must be incredibly difficult, and also it must play with your head slightly.
You know, it started to play with my head later. Then once we started filming, what was challenging was feeling the real life symptoms of being Patrizia all the time and what she went through. A woman living in a man's world.
Do you want to be left in the dust?
House of Gucci, directed by Ridley Scott, tells the story leading up to the shooting dead of Maurizio Gucci in 1995 and the subsequent jailing of his ex-wife Patrizia for hiring a hitman to kill him. She was released in 2016 and is reportedly annoyed at Gaga's refusal to meet her before filming.
I think what she did was wrong. I think she deeply regrets it. And if anything, I extend my heart to her daughters. They probably don't want that, but for what it's worth, I do care deeply that this must be very painful for them. And, you know, as an actress, that's something I have to reckon with.
Do you still feel like you have a lot to prove as an actor, because the world knows you, of course, as a multi-award winning singer?
I do feel comfortable in my acting skin. I have put acting into my music my whole life. What resonates with me is this idea that earning my place or earning my spot, that feels accurate.
You picked a real firecracker. She's a handful.
Bravo.
There is already talk that that spot might include an Oscar nomination. Nina Nana, ITV News.
And that's it for now. Julie's here at 10 from me and all the team. Bye-bye.